Today I'm going to talk a little bit about what motivates us. You know, when we break down motivation, we only have very few reasons to choose from as to why we're motivated to do something. We do it from a sense of obligation because we want to make sure our word is good. We do it possibly out of a fear of loss. We do it out of sometimes a realization of gain. Or as Napoleon Hill mentioned in the book Think and Grow Rich, he said for men a lot of times the thing that motivates them is doing something to impress a female, be it your mother, your sister, your girlfriend, or your wife. And it kind of reminds me of when I played Little League football. I've always through my career, football career, I basically played defensive lineman up until I got to the University of Houston where they moved me to linebacker. And normally defensive linemen, would wear a high jersey number. And my number was 90 my first year playing Little League football. And before the game started, we would line up under the goalpost, and all the cheerleaders would come and run from the goalpost to the sideline when they mentioned our name. Well, there was probably only about 8 to 10 cheerleaders. And once they ran out with the guys at the front, they never came back and ran out with the rest of us. I didn't think that was too fair. Because normally those guys at the front were the ones already getting all of the highlight film anyway, the quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers. And so I didn't think that was fair that the rest of us guys didn't have cheerleaders running out with us. So the next season, I told my coaches I wanted to wear number 13 because that jersey number wasn't taken. And they told me, as a defensive lineman, you're supposed to wear this jersey number, and I wouldn't be denied because my motivation was to run out with me a cheerleader every game that season. And after a while, they gave me number 13 before the season started. And after that motivation was satisfied, I told them I'll go back to my old jersey number for the next 2 years. In high school, I wore number 83, I wore number 80, I wore number 77. But in high school, we didn't have to line up and run with the cheerleaders. Whoever came out of the locker room first got to run with the cheerleaders, so you know which part of the line I was in. And so we do things for one reason or another. And sad to say, society has really conditioned us to do things out of fear. Most of us operate from a fear of loss motivation. Motivation is something we participate in daily, either voluntary or involuntary. And so you have to ask yourself in the morning, if you have to wake up by alarm clock, is that a voluntary motivation or involuntary? Well, we all know what it is. It's involuntary because the things that we get excited about, we don't need an alarm clock to wake us up. If we have to be to work at 8 o'clock every morning, and depending on how far you work and how traffic is in your area, you might have to wake up at 6 o'clock, 6:30, to get ready to go to work. But if we have a trip or we're going to take a cruise somewhere and the ship is going to leave or the plane's going to leave at 7 in the morning and we have to get up maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock so we can get there on time, isn't it amazing that we don't need an alarm clock to wake us up? Because it's a different type of adrenaline. It's a positive adrenaline versus the negative adrenaline when we get up in the morning for things that motivate us, that really motivate us. And when we think about motivation, just think about our jobs. Things are really not like they were when my dad retired, and he retired after working 30 plus years with the city. He didn't make 40, but he worked 30 plus. And my grandfather, who's former military and retired, and so you don't think about people like that. My wife's father, who retired after 30 plus years with a large national chain, and you just don't have people working that long anymore on one job. All the experts say throughout the course of our lives now, we're on an average going to work 10 to 12 different jobs. And it's not because the job is just bad. It doesn't motivate us anymore. See, out of college, when you're making zero money, any job sounds good. But after a while, you know, some some reason or another, we leave that job because it doesn't motivate us to wake up and go there in the morning. So we can say we're leaving because somebody else is offering more money. We can say we're leaving because we don't like our boss. We can say we're leaving because we can't stand our co-workers. We can say we're leaving because it's a lot closer to where I live. But something is motivating us to leave there, and only we know what it is. But we go through life like that, and society conditions us to be average, like the image on the screen is titled An Enemy Called Average by John Mason, and this book was written several years ago. Now, one of my motivations is to be able to buy a Ferrari cash money one day. And I remember working with a gentleman years ago, and we always talk about fast vehicles. He loves motorcycles. He's bought several. And then he was asking me, why did I stay focused on the Ferrari so much? I used to come to work, and I had bought model Ferraris out of the store and put together, and I used to ride around with them in the window of my car with me. And he said, dude, don't worry about trying to get a Ferrari. Get your Acura NSX. It looks almost like a Ferrari, and it's about 1/5 of the cost. And I said, why would I want to go buy something that looks like my dream? And see, that's what happens a lot of times. People that are close to us try to hamper our motivation. And material things, I'm not saying that's what motivates me totally. I have some other things that motivate me. Do you like to give to charity? Do you like to help others? Do you need to get out of debt? Do you need to just take some pressure off in case something happened to you? Those are just things to think about. Do you have kids right now? Even if you don't have kids now and you're planning on having kids, have you started a college fund for them? Because college is expensive. And I think the last statistic I read, because I do a lot of reading, and I think it said since 1983, if I'm not mistaken, college tuition had increased over 1,333%. So, are you going to sit around for the next, depending on how old your child is, for the next 18 years, praying and hoping that your child gets a college scholarship? And a lot of parents sit there and, pray that they get a scholarship, but, don't make plans to put some money to the side just in case they don't get a scholarship. They're not handing out Pell Grants that often anymore. And if you don't get a scholarship, if you're not working, in most cases, you take a loan. And now you have a new motivation 6 months after you graduate college or leave college. You don't even have to graduate, but 6 months after you go to that last class, you're going to start paying that loan back. And so now you have some new motivation. And that's a negative motivation. But we go through life like that. I remember being in school, and certain classes didn't motivate me. So, when we're in places that don't motivate us, we're normally inattentive. I remember in school, one of the classes that motivated me was woodshop, and any type of history or economics class that would motivate me. And so we have to pay attention. And a lot of times, as I mentioned earlier about getting a Ferrari, you don't have to like a Ferrari like I do. Have you seen the new Corvette ZR1? Oh man, it's nice. What about maybe a Camaro or Bentley or Lexus or something like that? I'm just saying, I started listening to guys who had hit that age 35, 40, 45 range, and I listened to how their dreams had totally changed from being, a young man that wanted a fast car to a man that's talking about, man, I got almost 300,000 miles on my Honda Accord. And I'm not putting the Honda Accord down. I've had 4 of them. They're great cars. But I'm just saying, look at the way the dream changes. Look at the way the motivation has shifted. And society has us condemning rich and wealthy people. Society has us, they'll come on TV with these commercials with these skinny people talking about what you need to do to lose weight. These people skinny before they put them on the commercial. But they're telling you their system works. And, any system will work if you work it. You don't have to keep changing. Every year, every new year, some new workout crazes come. And, we're all motivated for the first 30 days of the year to lose weight. And after that, on day 31, January 31st, the parking lot's empty at the gym. So we're not motivated anymore. What's going to motivate you long term? Other than getting past our selfishness of not wanting to work out and start thinking of something that's going to outlive you, being around physically to enjoy your kids and your spouse. Would something like that motivate you? So we have to start thinking like that. And society conditions us via all the things that come across the television screen that make us feel inferior, that make us get unmotivated, if that's even a word, or demotivated. Take your pick, but you get what I'm saying. And so we go through life living miserable like that. And a lot of times what we'll do, we'll get out of school, as I mentioned earlier, and any salary looks great when we've been in college making nothing. And so we'll come out and we'll have these great dreams. And we'll look at our salary. And we'll say, man, there's no way I'm going to ever be able to really afford the things that I really want. And so that's part of the reason we change jobs, because we think by changing jobs and maybe getting that $5, $10, $15,000 increase, we're going to start getting some of our dreams and goals. And the only thing that happens when we do that is because we haven't learned how to change our thinking, is our expenses increase. And so we have these great big dreams, and our income circle is about 1/10 of the size of our dreams. So what most people do, because society has conditioned them, instead of finding out ways to increase their income, they'll shrink their dreams to fit that income. And so we go through life living settled for because the motivation hasn't been sufficient enough. And as I mentioned earlier, the guy that I worked with when we were in management, we were both managers, got promoted the same day. I started looking at my income and I said, man, look at the things I want to do with my life and look at the income I'm making. And when you're on salary, it's and that paycheck is not going to change every 2 weeks or every week, however you get paid, or if you work for the state on the 15th and the 30th or the 1st and 15th, however it works out. And that salary is not going to change from week to week. It gets pretty discouraging that how much your check is going to be every 2 weeks. There's no need in looking for any extra unless you had a good year and you tend to get a bonus. And then when you get that bonus, they tax you almost 50% of the bonus, and it kind of discourages you all over again. And I'm just talking from my experience. And so a lot of times we don't want to get motivated to do things that are going to impact us in a negative way. We shouldn't anyway. And so we have one of two reasons in most cases why we really do something. We have the real reason we're motivated, and then we have the right reason we're motivated. And when I say the right reason is the right one we give to people when they ask us why we're doing something. That's the one we share with people. And then the real reason is the one we keep to ourselves as to why we do something. Napoleon Hill, as I mentioned, said we're going to do something for a woman in most cases. But what motivates you? What motivates you? And we have to really think about the things that motivate us or don't motivate us. A few years ago, I was hovering around 300 pounds. If you see me right now, I'm almost back there again because the last couple of years I've had 3 operations on my feet, and it's really put me in a different situation. But I can't wait till I get this last wound healed on my foot so I can get back on my exercise program because I can't stand being like this. But I was about 300 pounds some years ago. I was working for a company, and I had several accounts around Houston and the surrounding area that I serviced. And because of that, in passing in between the accounts, I would always stop at a drive-through window. And I mean, I stopped at drive-through windows so much I should have bought stock in every last one of them. You know, I'd probably be filthy rich right about now if I'd have bought stock in these companies. But living that type of lifestyle, eating that fast, greasy food on a daily basis, and all I'm doing is sitting in a car and going from place to place working, you know, it takes a toll on you. You know, a lot of days I got started, a lot of times I was at my first account at 4:30 in the morning. I mean, that's real hard for a person who doesn't like to get up early in the morning. I'm a night owl. And I had a tendency to work till about 5, 5:30, some evening 6. Sometimes I had to go in on Saturdays. And I wasn't getting much sleep because when I got off work, I was working on some other things. And so, like I said, I'm a night owl. I get a lot of energy at night. Now, I will get up. I do get excited if I'm going to speak somewhere in the morning. You know, I do get excited about that. So I don't need an alarm clock to wake me up when I have to go speak because I enjoy sharing with people. That motivates me to go out and help somebody that day. But I'm a night owl, so during that period, when I put on all that weight, I was going to sleep no earlier than 12:30 every night. Some nights I went to bed about 1:30 in the morning. And getting back up at 3 o'clock and 3:30 in the morning, depending on where I was going that morning, because I had some days, you know, I had to drive 30 miles one way. Some days I had to drive 50 miles one way. You know, some days I actually drove to service accounts in Louisiana or Dallas. And so I would leave home early in the morning because I didn't want to drive late at night sometimes. And so we're doing things because in a sense, you know, that's a negative motivation, but at the same time, it's a motivation of obligation because you want to make the money. And, you know, I'm servicing these accounts and I'm on salary. And so, you know, I was motivated, you know, so as I talk throughout this, I'm talking to myself the whole time. But putting on all that weight, you know, that starts causing problems for us. And I set a goal to get down to between 215 and 225 pounds and maintain it right in that range. And I did it. You know, I cut back on all that fast food eating. I would start keeping a cooler in the car with fruit and bottles of water and protein bars with no sugar in it. And, you know, I started exercising. You know, I started making time to exercise and walk. And I came across this 10-minute workout program. And as being a former athlete, I never thought you could get in shape in 10 minutes a day. Because we felt like, as football players especially, we felt like it took forever to get in shape. And so the 10-minute workout, at the end of each 10-minute workout, I was huffing and puffing. And the weight came off. And so when I went in for my first surgery back on December 28, 2011, I went in the hospital at 209 pounds. Now, that was a little bit lower than I wanted to be. And so I was maintaining that weight because I never wanted to put this weight on again. But like I said, right now, you know, I'm dealing with it again, but I'll get it off again. You know, I'm motivated because I don't want to leave the earth prematurely just because I was too lazy. You know, I don't want to leave my wife here, you know, for some other dude to come marry. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm serious. But no, you know, but I don't want to leave my wife prematurely because it was something I could have controlled. And we can all control our diets. We can all control our workout routines and things like that. And so, you know, going to the doctor said I'm almost home. You know, in about another month, He said that should be my last visit. So we're looking good. Things are looking on the upswing. And so we have to get real serious about our motivations. I remember being in a restaurant one evening. I was meeting somebody to talk some business strategies late one evening. And I have a tendency to get to whatever appointment I'm going to, sometimes 15 to 30 minutes early, because I like to leave early enough just in case traffic or something, catches me and I can still make it there on time. And so I'm sitting in Burger King, and there's a gentleman in there, and I appreciate talking to people. I like to talk to people wherever I go. And I'm just talking to this guy. He a recent college grad, and I mean, he was a school teacher at the time. And I mean, this guy had no spark in his life whatsoever. I mean, I couldn't find anything to get his hot button going. Nothing excited him. And so it really hurt me to see a young man, 22 years old, that had no motivation. I mean, it hurts. And we have to ask ourselves, are we motivated by short-term pleasure or long-term happiness? And as we look across society, most of us are motivated by short-term pleasure. If it feels good right now, do it. I don't care about the consequences. Some people live, they say, well, tomorrow's not guaranteed, so I'm going to party and live it up today. I'm going to spend all my money today. I'll worry about tomorrow if I make it to it. That's not a way to live. But we should live life to the fullest. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying we shouldn't live life recklessly. And see, that's a difference. And so when I got to the University of Houston, they assigned jersey numbers. And here we go with the jersey situation again. And I didn't get any scholarship offers, athletics, anywhere. I got hurt my senior year in high school. And all the colleges, I found out right before I graduated that several colleges were still looking for me. But found out later that my coach was throwing the letters in the trash. And so, that kind of bothered me a little bit. So I walked on at the University of Houston. I didn't get an academic scholarship. I graduated number 20 in my high school class. I had some motivation to do that because my parents didn't really allow me and my sisters to bring bees home. So we had some motivation there because there were some consequences if, we brought anything below a B home for the most part. And so when I got to U of H, I said, well, I'm just going to go to school. And, I basically said my ball playing days were over. But, it's just something that was in me that said, you love football. And so something inside of me made me go by the coach's office. And I stopped and talked with one of the coaches, and he told me they knew who I was. And we talked for about 15, 20 minutes, and, I told him, what my objective was, and he told me, well, come on out, and he told me which day to report for camp. And as I mentioned, I was a walk-on, non-scholarship player. And the day they assigned jersey numbers, my jersey number was 101. Now, they don't have 3-digit jersey numbers anywhere. What they had done, they had given me a jersey with the number 01 on it, and they had taken a piece of tape and put a strap of tape in front of the 0 for my number. So my jersey number was 101. I mean, I was at a new low, but at the same time, I had a new motivation. I said, I'm going to get me a 2-digit jersey number. And so after several weeks of practicing, because I believe in going all out. If you're going to do something, I believe in laying it all on the line every day. And I came to my locker one day in the locker room, and there was a post-it note on my locker that said, your New Jersey number is 93. No, not 93, I'm sorry. But your New Jersey number is number 91. And when I saw that, I was so happy. because I had accomplished again. And the very first thing I said was, nobody's ever going to get this jersey number as long as I'm playing ball here. I said, this guy will never get this jersey number back. And he didn't, because I was motivated to keep it to myself. You know, we go out and hang out with our friends instead of working towards our dreams and goals. We watch the game or television show that makes us feel good, and it momentarily takes away our pains. You know, if we're seeking a long-term happiness, we learn to exercise discipline in watching what we eat. You know, we exercise on a regular basis even if we don't feel like it. You know, it's real easy to go and exercise, but it's a lot easier not to. You know, we start learning how to pass up the opportunity to hang out because we want what we say we actually want. You know, I couldn't hang out all the time. You know, I spent a lot of time in the library writing and studying, you know, when I was at college, and I couldn't hang out with a lot of these guys. You know, I'm not saying I didn't hang out, but I'm just saying I couldn't spend a lot of time hanging out a lot of times. And so you know, we have to make sure our motivation is sufficient. And as I mentioned earlier, if what you say you want is not motivating you, you really need to reanalyze if that's really what you say you want. We have to learn how to prioritize. And the only way we can learn how to prioritize, we have to have something that moves us. When do we want the things that we say we want? Are we hurting enough to make some changes and improvements? And see, I don't really like to use the word change because most people reject the word change. So I like to use the word improve. And you know, when we work on improving things, things automatically change for us. You know, or do we sit on the nail like the dog under the porch? And what I mean by that, this guy was walking down the street and he saw a gentleman sitting on a porch in his rocking chair and he heard his dog howling. The dog was under the porch, so he walked up the man's sidewalk to his porch and said, "Sir, you know, why is your dog under the porch howling?" He said, "Because he's sitting on a nail." And he said, "Well, why won't he get up off the nail?" And the guy on the porch said, "Because it's not hurting him bad enough." And a lot of times that's how we go through our lives. Our lives aren't hurting us bad enough. You know, we've learned how to settle for. We learn how to be satisfied with a mediocre lifestyle. And you know, there's another book I read years ago by Chuck Swindoll called Living Above the Level of Mediocrity. And I mean, that book totally changed my life. People that excelled in life were highly motivated. Where do you want to go with your life? And if you know where you want to go, the next question you have to ask yourself is, how do you get there? You know, and if we're not getting the right results, you know, a lot of times we need new awarenesses. You know, when we don't have a reason to do something, we will never find sufficient motivation to do it. What will it take to move you from the things that hinder you? You know, if you didn't have any installment debt at all, no installment debt, I'm talking about credit card, medical bills, car payment, house payment, if you didn't have any of that to pay, how much money could you keep each month out of your paycheck? You know, think about it, the only bills you had to pay was the stuff you use on a monthly basis like water, light, and gas and things like that. You know, what would life be like if you could live like that? And you could take some of that money that you've been building the bank's wealth with, and you could take some of that money and start investing and building your wealth. Does something like that motivate you? You know, only you can answer that. You know, have we actually prepared to win our lives? Or are we letting some other person or outside force motivate us to live the life they want us to live? You know, where will you be in the next 2 years if you keep following the same path that you followed the last 2 years? You know, that's something to think about. If you are heading in the direction that you desire, I mean, more power to you. That's great, and I'm happy for you. But if not, we might have to evaluate and change our course. What's the saying? There were two roads that diverged in the wood, and I traveled the one less traveled, and that has made all the difference. See, the one that's normally traveled is, go to school and get a good education and go get a job just like everybody else. That's the one that's traveled. And that's the one that's being sold, especially in our local school district here, that's gotten rid of practically all the vocational programs because they want to create a college-bound culture. Everybody's not cut out for college. I read a blog earlier, very successful businessman posted, and it was talking about the more education we have, outside of all of the factors, they've done the research. In most cases, we live longer. And, I kind of disagree in a sense, but, I understand what the blog was saying, because I've had the greatest education since I left college, because I'm studying things that are important to me. And I think the whole gist of the article was keeping the mind sharp and occupied on things that teach us for long periods of time. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's what I got out of the article. And so we have to ask ourselves, is there something else out there that we would like to accomplish? There used to be a television show called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And as I mentioned earlier, growing up, our family is associated with people that pretty much had the same income range. And, seeing TV shows like, I don't know if any of you can old enough to remember the TV show Heart to Heart, or Dallas, or Knots Landing, or Dynasty, things like that, where you saw these people living rich lives. And, I've had people say, well, I don't want to be rich because rich people have problems. Well, show me a poor person that doesn't. But, you saw these people on these TV shows living like that, grand lifestyle, and then you have, family members and things like that telling you, oh, that's just on TV. Nobody lives like that for real. And then the show Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous came on. I was about 13 years old. And my mind was expanded greatly from that standpoint, because those were real people living like that. And one of my mentors, he passed on back in 2010. He told me, once the mind is expanded, it's just like a rubber band. It will never go back to the original size. And so we can sit here and act like we don't want the things we said we wanted, but always in the back of our mind, it's going to eat at us. And, a lot of times that's where our stress comes from. And personally, I think that's where disease comes from. And, dis-ease. We're not at ease because we're not chasing after our dreams and goals. We haven't found a sufficient motivation to chase our dreams and goals. So we are at dis-ease, which creates disease, and because of the stress that's eating us up internally. And so my mind has never been the same since. But you go through life and you grow up and you still see people that kind of live the same way you live. And then I was working at this company, office supply company, and we used to make deliveries out to a place near here called Clear Lake, and I started making deliveries in some of these homes. I said, man, these folks live a little different out here. And so that motivation was reignited. That dream circle was reignited. And so Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous showed real people and their lifestyles, which now disproved everything I had been taught. And, I don't think it comes on anymore, but, the thing that for this generation this time was MTV Cribs. But, back then it wasn't just entertainers, it was business people and everybody that was on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And so in college, I met a gentleman who was from Beaumont, Texas. He's a very successful doctor in Beaumont right now. And we don't talk as often, but, we still have communication. and he helped expand my thinking, especially in the area of music. And you know, you don't believe people live a certain way, and this guy and I had developed a real close relationship. We were actually gonna we had actually thought about creating our own rap group. We wouldn't call ourselves the Funk Mob. It's probably best that we did know. You know, both of us had a lot of an awareness and a lot of knowledge and wisdom, but I don't know if that would have really carried over into the rap scene. But I had the opportunity to go down. We went to Beaumont one night for a party at the campus of Lamar University. And of course, by him being from Beaumont, of course, he had to visit his parents. And once again, my mind was expanded because they live on the west end of Beaumont, which is where people that have some financial means live. And so, you know, here we go again. He didn't know it, but he was expanding my dream even more. And so, you know, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to find out what really pushes our hot button. You know, and I started to believe even more that if I worked hard, but not only worked hard, if I learned how to work smart and learn leverage and things like that, I could have some of the finer things in life too. And you know, what happens to us, as I've been mentioning throughout this whole talk, is life. You know, so life beats us up, but our motivation has to be stronger than our life circumstances. You know, there is something inherent in each one of us that says the life we're living right now is not really who we are. If the dream is not sufficient to give us motivation, we're going to be satisfied with a settled for life. And the things that are in that settled for life will never satisfy us. There's always a burn inside each one of us that says we deserve better. I started to get frustrated with my conditions in life. That's why I started seeking out ways to improve it. What happens a lot of times in our lives is we see time pass us by. We have dreams of grandeur as youngsters. We have dreams of survival as adults. The reason we change is growth. And a lot of times, the reason we don't change is the lack of growth. And if you think you're standing still, you got another thing coming. If you're not doing anything to improve, you're actually moving backwards. There's no such thing as standing still. You know, just like there really isn't a such thing as the future, because the future's not promised to us. All we have is right now. So, you know, how are you going to make right now count? And as I mentioned earlier, if we have kids, how do we motivate them if they never see us going after anything? If they see us when we get home at the end of the day and all we're doing is sitting in front of a TV, and they've went to school for the same amount of time that you've been at work all day, and they come home and they still have homework to do after they might have participated in extracurricular activities or some sports after school. They're actually being motivated to do things like that, and they come home and see you do nothing but you talk a good game. You know, I remember talking to a married couple about what the future held for them and their kids. And the husband told me he didn't want to earn more money because earning more money would mean he'd have to provide a better lifestyle for his kids. Can you imagine that? And he didn't want to spoil his kids growing up because he wanted his kids to have it just as hard as he had it as a kid growing up. Now, life is going to throw all of us a different set of challenges. But the lifestyle that we're supposed to create is one where our kids are actually supposed to stand on our shoulders and see further down the road. And if the lifestyle we create where our kids are only standing next to us, then we haven't done anything to provide for their future. And so when our kids see the same obstacles we see, they face them with the same thought process that we face them with, because we have not learned how to overcome those obstacles. So if we've never learned how to overcome those obstacles, how can we teach our kids to overcome those obstacles? If they stand on our shoulders, they can overlook some of the issues and obstacles we had to face. Why encourage your kids to live from a position of lack? Is your motivation so weak that you're afraid that you will be found out, that you talk a good game to your kids, but you lack the desire to do any better?